Welcome to Terror in Tandem, a podcast about finding entertainment in the macabre, hosted by the knowledgeable and lovable Laura and Richard Mathiasen. Each episode we discuss the horror genre, from books to film to TV and beyond. Sometimes, even from the beyond. You can find us online at terrorintandem.com and on Instagram at terrorintandem.
Hello.
Hello.
What did you say?
At Terror in Tandem.
Yeah, what did you say the first time?
At.
Oh, you just kept repeating it?
At.
Wow.
Oh, I'm glitching.
Speaking of repeating, this is another Stephen King episode.
Yay! Mining for content.
No, that's not true.
No, honestly, we decided.
We just can't stop.
Like halfway through, I think, examining his literary works, we looked at each other and we were like, you should definitely do an episode on the adaptations. And then halfway through discussing the adaptation episodes, decided that it's going to be a two-parter.
Yeah. So, and then we'll move on. And I think we might do Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah. Well, or somebody. I mean, somebody not Stephen King.
Well,
unless like a few years from now we want to do.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to
let's just never close the door on that. But you know
what?
We'll take a break.
Be new series.
We'll take a break.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, this is going to be our Stephen King adaptations.
70s
part 1
through the 90s. Right?
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. 70s
Absolutely.
through the 90s?
Mm-hmm.
Good, because that is what I researched.
Not through the 90s, but to 1990.
Oh,
to 1990.
Up to 1990?
Yeah.
All right. Good to know.
Oh, well, we had talked about it.
Some of my recommendations are going to
Well, I didn't think they were recommendations as much as we're just going to talk about some of the highlights of the adaptations of this time frame.
And some of the ones I was really looking forward to talking to are unfortunately going to have to wait until part 2.
Well, at least you're done for part 2.
I like to do my homework out of sequence, but I have plenty to talk about for this time period. I am good to go.
Well, why don't we just jump right in then?
Right. Okay.
Yeah, why not?
Love it.
So, as you know, most people know that adaptations are becoming so pervasive in our viewing pleasure and pain.
It's become, with studio conglomeration and less risk-taking, it's become rarer and rarer to have an IP that is wholly original. I mean, this weekend, Barbie and Oppenheimer are coming out, and those are 2 original films, which, great. But are they? I mean, Barbie is based on an existing intellectual property, and Oppenheimer
it's just a character. It doesn't have anything
I understand
to do
that,
with,
but Oppenheimer is a biopic. What I'm saying is even the quote-unquote original films aren't quite original. And also Oppenheimer, I believe, is partially based on a biography that was written about him.
Yeah. I mean, they're like, one is about a toy and the other's about a person.
I think we're just all excited that it's not another fucking superhero movie.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
actual movie for adults. That's cool.
You heard it here first. Superhero fatigue from the Superhero Comic Book Cafe Burger.
It's not superhero fatigue. It's content fatigue.
Did you hear what I just said?
I get it. But like,
no.
Did
you hear what I said? I said comic book and burger. Comic book cafe, burgers, and more.
Yeah, we passed a place today.
Listen, this could be free advertising.
I don't know if it was a comic book store that sold burgers or a burger store with a comic book theme, but...
We pulled up to the door and it said ice cream. So is that the more?
But like the windows were kind of blocked out like it was a strip club. I mean...
No, that's not true.
I couldn't see inside.
That's not true. It looked like a little town cafe, but we couldn't really see inside because they had higher windows.
I think it had like just probably a menu with a bunch of puns.
Stay tuned as we dive into more local flavor.
So Stephen King.
Yeah. So he's one of the most adapted authors of all time.
I would say easily. And we are in the midst of, it's not that they ever stopped adapting his work, but we are certainly in the midst of every single fucking thing is being picked up. They're adapting, they're remaking things they've already adapted.
Well, I agree with some of it, and some of it I don't. I think we'll get into that a little bit when we talk more about the specific adaptations that we want to, explore further. But one of the first adaptations for Stephen King was Carrie, and that actually was his first novel.
It was not only his first novel, but it was the first adaptation of any of his work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there was a TV movie in 2002 that was remade, and then the theatrical remake with Chloe Grace Moretz was in 2013.
So yeah, I mean, Carrie, I always think of it as a standalone film, even though it is technically a franchise, unfortunately. So the original one that we're going to focus on is 1976, directed by Brian De Palma. Now, this is Stephen King is a nobody. Brian De Palma hasn't really done much at this point. This is way before Dress to Kill and Body Double and all that stuff. So anyway, Brian De Palma ends up reading this screenplay, falling in love with it, really becomes an advocate for the film, and he almost casts Melanie Griffith in the part of Carrie White until Sissy Spacek was encouraged by her then husband to audition. She showed up dressed in this like raggedy skirt from when she was in middle school, and put Vaseline in her hair. She didn't wear any makeup. She came as Carrie White, and it blew everyone away. She was nominated for an Oscar for this role. Piper Laurie was nominated for an Oscar for playing her mother in like one of the greatest evil mom roles of all time. Piper Laurie is so scary.
Yeah,
in this movie.
she is.
It's got a great cast.
I would say that I wouldn't say this. Stephen King said that he really did enjoy the Brian De Palma film of Carrie, but he did go back like later in a more contemporary interview and say that he does think the film is now dated. So that's why he was open to the 2013
Well, here's the thing.
remake.
It's not just that. There was a sequel called The Rage, Carrie 2, which had nothing to do with Carrie. Then there was a remake in 2002 that Brian Fuller wrote, starring the incredible Angela Bettis. And that had all the elements to be fantastic. And it wasn't.
Right.
And then you had the absolutely toothless remake with Chloe Grace Moretz.
It wasn't horrible.
It's just that...
But it didn't... It wasn't... it didn't have the same, like, heart or...
No matter what you do...
feeling from the first.
You are never going to get the combination of Brian De Palma, Sissy Spacek, John Travolta, Nancy Allen, PJ Souls, and fucking Piper Laurie all at once. You're just not getting that again. That is magic in a bottle. It happened once.
Well, Stephen King said
and not to mention the fucking greatest American hero himself, William Catt.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I can't leave him out. He is the greatest American hero.
Yeah, and a greatest American villain in this film.
No, he's not a bad guy in this one.
I mean, he doesn't do anything to stop them.
He does unnecessarily get murdered for no reason. I maintain that he's just a pretty boy who, doesn't know any better. Keep in mind, they're supposed to be 17 years old.
Yeah. Stephen King said that the attitude of this film was very different than his novel because he deals with, things head on. And he said that Brian De Palma saw a chance to make a movie of a high school in general and look at high school peer groups. And although, Sissy Spacek was amazing, he said he thought that John Travolta played the part of Billy Nolan the way he'd wish he'd written him.
That is really cool. I mean, high praise for one. And yes, John Travolta playing a loudmouth dipshit bully, especially when John Travolta was young, he just had the perfect energy for it. And he's really good in the role. It's a small role, but he really plays just a smarmy, unlikable fuck that all of us went to high school with.
Yeah.
No matter where you are in the world, you went to high school with these mean
especially
kids.
in the late 70s and 80s.
Oh, yeah, when bullying, was...
like par for the course.
I feel like that's never changed. But
one of the biggest things too is the ending. We've talked about it in our previous Stephen King deep dives.
Yeah.
But in the book, Carrie destroys the entire town, and Brian De Palma said that he couldn't do that because of budget issues.
It makes sense. Yeah. And limiting it to the school, honestly, works better for me because it's still, while Carrie does become a villain at the end, by limiting her destruction to those that caused her the trauma and to the place where the trauma occurred, at least it's something. Destroying the whole town is just like, now you're just like a nuclear goddess or something of vengeance. But, it's funny that you mention the ending because I want to talk about that a little bit. So Sissy Spacek, by the way, is a fucking real one. Showing up to the audition the way that she did, she's incredible in this role. In real life, she's like 26 or 27 at this point, playing a 16-year-old, and really
Very
looks like she's
convincing.
16. Yeah, holy crap. So now, spoiler alert for a movie from 1976, but it has one of the greatest freak-out jump scare endings of any horror movie.
Yeah.
It is amazing. So that sequence where Carrie's hand pops out of the grave and Sue Snell is there. Someone's vandalized the headstone with Carrie White burns in hell, and it's really dreamlike because it is a dream. And so
we also learned a couple of episodes ago that scene was taken from the original Friday the 13th. Or was it the other way around?
What?
Right, it's the other way around. The director of the original Friday the 13th said that he stole that hand out of the ground.
Right. Yeah.
Carrie.
Yeah. Well, Sean
we
Cunningham stole most of that movie from other filmmakers.
Yeah, sure. That's what I meant, though.
But so that dream sequence was shot in reverse to make it seem kind of otherworldly and weird. And Sissy Spacek herself, being a real one, absolutely demanded that she be the one buried in dirt and not a stunt double, which left Brian De Palma with the uncomfortable task of having to assign a crew member to shovel dirt onto their leading actor and, have her sit there for hours while they do this technical shot. No one wanted to do it, so they compromised by calling Spacek's husband to the set to bury her alive. And the end result speaks for itself. It's a banger of an ending. And then, Amy Irving wakes up screaming, and it's really, really, really fantastic. It's one of...
She's been married to the same man her whole life.
Oh, okay.
Jack Fisk.
Funnily enough, about marriage, after this movie, Nancy Allen got married to Brian De Palma for like 3 or 4 years.
Well, an interesting fact about Jack Fisk is that he's a production designer known for his collaborations with Terrence Malick, designing all of his first 8 films.
Which is, I believe, where he and Sissy Spacek met because she starred in Badlands, which was Malick's first film and also, in my opinion, his most watchable.
Yeah, they got married in 1974.
Yeah, Martin Sheen and Sissy Spacek are great in Badlands. It's kind of loosely based on Charles Lee Starkweather, I think was his name, that thrill killer. But anyway, so Stephen King got paid $2,500 for this movie that grossed $33 million in 1976. So you can kind of understand what the WGA is talking about all these years later.
Yeah.
Somebody made millions of dollars, and it wasn't the person that created literally everything that went into the movie. But don't cry for me, Stephen King. He's doing okay. He's doing fine. So that's Carrie. It's the first one. Imagine having your debut novel adapted 2 years. It was released 2 years after it was published. I mean, what a breakneck pace.
And after he had been writing for quite a long time. Oh, yeah. We already know that story that Tabitha is the one that...
It's just that when success came for Stephen King, it came quickly.
Yeah.
It didn't happen for a while, but when it did happen, It really happened.
Well, let's talk about Salem's Lot next.
Nice.
So Salem's Lot was the first Stephen King book to become a TV miniseries, and it, is a super fan vampire horror fan classic.
It is so good. It's directed by Tobe Hooper of
Yep.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Life Force
Yep.
fame and Eaten Alive. It's got a young Bonnie Bedelia in it.
Yeah.
The mom from Die Hard.
So David Soul, which I always thought that was so interesting, plays Ben Mears.
Yep.
And it's, he's a horror author who returned to his sleepy Maine hometown to write about a creepy local mansion called the Marston House. And James Mason, who everybody knew as Captain Nemo,
Oh, yes. James Mason.
comes to play Richard Straker.
Yeah. Amazing name.
Yeah.
Dick Stroker.
And he's the shady antique dealer who just bought the Marston house and hopes opening an antique shop with his young companion, Kurt Barlow.
Yeah, let's just say if Stephen King is writing about an antique shop, it's bad.
Not to be outshined by the main
It's
cast.
actually outshining.
Local townies played by the likes of Fred Willard, Jeffrey Lewis.
It's wild to see Fred Willard as a not old man.
Yeah.
Because that is the only way I ever knew him.
Right. And so it touches on, all of the small town gossipy stuff. And it really, I think the film really, or the miniseries, I guess we have to call it, it shows the different romantic entanglements and abusive relationships and all of the different, inner workings and
It is
issues with the
also
small town of Salem's
scary
Lot
as
or
shit.
Jerusalem's Lot.
It's really scary, too. It's
Yeah.
legit one of the scarier Stephen King movies.
So Tobe Hooper directed this, and later the film The Lost Boys stole a scene directly from Salem's Lot.
Oh, I know exactly which one you're talking about.
Ralphie Glick.
Yeah.
Yeah, when he's floating outside of his brother Danny's window.
Yeah.
And his eyes are glowing and his fangs, and he's,
Yeah.
let me in.
They did a similar thing, I think, in Fright Night. The
Yeah.
flame floating outside the window.
Yeah.
But Salem's Lot was the one that did it first, and it is really scary.
Yeah. And so this was, I would say, one of the riskier takes because the book is so dense. It had to be a mini series. You couldn't really just have like an hour and a half film.
And, dear listener, let us transport you back in time to, if you wanted to watch this, you had to sit down when it was on and watch it.
Yep. Right.
That's it. There, maybe there might be a rerun, which is also something you would have to sit down and watch when it was on.
Yeah.
There is no pausing or rewinding or getting this later. You're watching it on TV as it happens. So,
but it was so dense. I mean, I would say the disadvantages of adaptations, and you can really see it here, is the local color and really identifying with the character and plot.
Well, yeah.
And character development is not as developed as it could have been if it were like a long standing series, which we may see in the new version.
well, there's currently,
If it's
I
ever
think
going to
there's
come out.
currently a show out now that's a prequel that has, what's his name? Adrian Brody in it. That's about Jerusalem's Lot, like way back in the day.
Like, but yeah, okay.
And I'm pretty sure Gary Dauberman
Like
is,
the short story Jerusalem's
Yeah.
Lot version?
Yeah, but it's
not
like
the Salem's Lot
exactly. Yeah, like
novelization?
the 19th century story of the town.
Yeah.
And also Gary Dauberman, I believe, is writing and directing the remake
Woof, woof.
which is supposed to be coming out. Yes.
Oh,
which is supposed to be coming out later this year. It's been delayed a few times.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah.
If it ever comes out.
Yeah.
But I do think that
like you were saying about adaptations, though, fans of the book know that a certain character ties very, very directly, and even becomes a major character in a lot of the Dark Tower stories.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So you lose that in the movie for sure.
And you lose a lot of nuance between this parasite, essentially, that comes and takes over the whole town. It happens so much quicker in the miniseries than it does in the book.
It does. Despite it being like 4 hours long because it was broken up over a couple of nights, it loses the, like you said, the parasitic, almost infectious quality of the evil.
The whole intention, and if you look at the original book cover, and this is the book cover that I remember most, is
I know exactly what you're
the
talking about.
wings that cover the entire town and mansion, especially. It's a taking over by this vampire.
I miss mass market paperbacks. I know they've largely gone away in favor of paperbacks that are like almost as expensive as hardcovers, but I miss the days when you could buy like a $5 novel and it had dope art that was also like kind of raised typeset.
Yeah.
Sometimes it would glow in the dark.
I mean, I would say so far we've talked about 2 adaptations. Carrie, I think is a good representation of that novel. You know, there was not a lot missing.
It's also a legit incredible movie. I mean,
Absolutely.
Piper Laurie and Sissy Spacek were both nominated for Academy Awards. They did not win. Network swept that year, and you know, in all fairness, Faye Dunaway crushed it.
But Salem's Lot, if you read a summary version of the novel or Cliff's Note version of the novel, then you could adapt that into this miniseries because you're not getting all of the nuance of Stephen King in his writing. And that's always been a problem for me, even from like an early age of watching these adaptations and coming from reading the books.
I like to
It's always been a disappointment because my brain is creating this world.
The way around that, in my experience, is to view them as companion pieces.
Yeah, a Cliff's Note version of it.
Well, not even that, because that is already entering into it, thinking of it as an abridged and lesser version. Just it is in a different medium. So it's a painting that has been made into a sculpture. Certain things are added, certain things are lost. It's the same basic concept, but it's a companion piece. It's not a replacement.
Well, I definitely think that in order to truly appreciate the highlights of the Salem's Lot miniseries, one should really read the book first because it's incredible. It's one of my favorite Stephen King books. So
it's a contender for one of his scariest books, I would say, for sure.
I'm interested in seeing what happens with some of these newer adaptations.
They've been pretty hit or miss for me, honestly.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when we get into our part 2 episode, there have been some really amazing adaptations of Stephen King's later work.
And
so
others that are just like, I don't know, you're just doing the same thing with a newer camera.
Yeah, well, that's what I think. Carrie, Firestarter, those are sort of, we need to remake this, so we're just gonna throw
it's just content
everything
churn.
at it. Yeah.
Well,
what do you have next?
I'm gonna talk not forever because I feel like enough people know about this one, but I do want to talk about The Shining, obviously.
Okay.
Stanley Kubrick's 1980 version of The Shining, not the miniseries from the 90s with Steven Weber that Stephen King greatly prefers and is literally the only one that prefers that version. So here's the thing. It's a complicated movie to talk about because on the one hand, it is undeniably one of the greatest horror movies ever made. It just is. It's a masterpiece of a film.
It's incredible.
It's incredibly scary. And yeah. On the other hand, it deviates pretty wildly from the source material in ways that made Stephen King hate the shit out of this movie forever. He literally still brings it up in interviews. He cannot get over this.
I feel like this is a circumstance of an original work and an adaptation that you can appreciate and love both.
I agree. And Mike Flanagan really brought that home when he adapted Dr. Sleep as both a sequel to the novel and the movie and made it work. It was amazing. But we'll get into that. Now,
we did get into it in our
on the third hand,
last episode.
That Viggo Mortensen grafted onto my stomach. Stanley Kubrick also quite famously tortured Shelley Duvall during the filming of this to the point where her hair started falling out and she had a complete mental collapse that I don't believe she quite recovered from ever.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. She's great in this movie. Would she have given the same performance if you didn't psychologically break her? Right. I would like to think it would be close enough. And I just want to go on record as saying Stanley Kubrick was a very complicated person, but I don't think you need to abuse people to make a fucking movie.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, this movie's incredible. If you want to know, if you want a really, really fantastic deep dive, there was a great documentary. It came out in 2012 called Room 237. And anyone who's seen the movie knows that significance, Room 237. It's a really good deep dive on the making of the film. It's just incredible. It's a masterpiece of tension building. Jack Nicholson's performance is career defining, even for Jack Nicholson. And it's a classic for a reason. There are some differences, yes, but the performances, the long tracking shots, the shocking moments that bathtub scene scared me maybe worse than anything had ever scared me up until that point.
Just the maze, the blood.
Yeah.
And there are some differences in that really stand out from the book, but I do think the Shining film is one of the adaptations that can stand alone. Like,
it can.
If you said, I can only do one thing, and that's read The Shining or watch The Shining.
You could do either. Yeah.
I would say it's fine to watch The Shining.
Yeah.
Or it's fine to just read The Shining.
It's a superlative film. It is one that requires more patience, perhaps, than a modern audience might be used to. It unfolds at a deliberate pace, and that is very important.
Well, it definitely has the aesthetic quality of feeling cold and isolated.
And it's, someone who's slowly being broken down psychologically and emotionally and then eventually possessed by the evil of this
there's
hotel.
4 or 5 people that are alive in this film, and that's it?
Basically, there's Scatman Crothers, Shelley Duvall, the kid who played Danny, Jack Nicholson, and then in the first scene, his
guy that hires
agent.
him. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's it.
Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah. And Scatman Crothers is fantastic, but the changes made to his character are among the more controversial.
Yeah.
And is one that I honestly do not agree with. But The Shining, 1980, undeniably a classic for very good reasons, should be watched.
Let's take a break.
Do it.
Looking to add some excitement to your Halloween party? Want to add some frights to the night? Well, look no further. Hire Brian. Brian can handle all of your wishes for a hauntingly good time for any style of party you might be hosting. Need a scary clown? Hire Brian. Want a secret stalker to scare trick-or-treaters? Brian is your man. Mad scientist? Scarecrow? Masked monster? Brian is up for all of it. Since completing his stint in a disreputable penitentiary, Brian has been fine-tuning his abilities to morph into what you need him to be, living up to his given nickname on the block, the Chameleon of Chaos. Brian is cheap, sometimes coming into your home for free. Brian will come and go as he pleases, sometimes without your knowledge. How easy is that? Depending on what you need Brian to do, he may add some of his own unique flair. Brian has a way of sticking with you, So tell your friends. We are not responsible for any damage, death, or dismemberment that Brian may or may not cause. Just go with it. Hire Brian. If you don't, he may show up anyway. This is a fake ad for a fake product and a horror-themed podcast. We do not condone nor endorse what Brian does that might be immoral or illegal.
Well, I feel broken.
Oh, we're Brack?
Did
Did I say Brack?
Bric-a-brac.
I want to talk about the 1983 film, The Dead Zone.
Oh. Wow.
You want to see some awesome cover art for the book?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
They have all different cover art. It's pretty amazing.
And the title sequence for the movie is really good.
Yeah, it's sort of that Stephen King text vibe. The Talisman has the same thing.
Yeah.
The Shining.
Yeah.
So there are many things I love about this book. But we're talking about adaptations. So I want to talk about the film that I love so much. So directed by David Cronenberg. This is one of the only Cronenberg movies I like, probably.
Well, it's...
Or that I can stomach.
At this point in his career, he had never made anything like this. It was a very atypical film for David Cronenberg. He's since made some films that are a little bit understated, but at this point he was known for Rabid, Shivers, and Scanners.
Scanners, especially.
So, Scanners was his biggest hit to date. So this is an extremely different kind of David Cronenberg movie. It's also a very different kind of Stephen King story.
Well, yeah. So Stephen King said about the novel that he thought it was the best he'd done up till that point because it's a real novel, because it's of its complexity. There's a story there. He said a lot of times many of his works are situations that are allowed to develop themselves, but this book is layered in texture and a thematic structure that works on a lot of levels.
It's also the equivalent of like an ethical quandary. You know, what would you do in this situation?
How he started writing it, by asking two questions. I mean, you're sort of touching on that, but the two questions were, can a political assassin ever be correct? And if he is, could you make him the protagonist of a novel? So
the answer is yes, yeah, you can.
Successfully so.
Yeah.
Stephen King wrote the script for the original film, but it wasn't used.
No.
Mostly because David Cronenberg said that it was too much. You know, he wanted to do too much.
Stephen King was not a screenwriter at this point.
Which he proved in Maximum Overdrive, which you're probably going to talk about, right?
He's proved it a few times, actually. He's gotten better at writing screenplays, but let's not forget I wish we were doing the 90s.
We will.
Okay.
So this story is essentially about a school teacher named Johnny who wakes up from a coma to find out he has psychic powers, and then he can see the future, and that future is bleak sometimes for people. Usually
when he makes contact with somebody,
shakes their hand, touches them,
he can
touch him.
He sees their basically their end game.
And the phrase "the dead zone" in the novel refers to the part of Johnny's brain that's irreparably damaged, resulting in his dormant psychic awakening. And
now Johnny in the movie is played beautifully.
Well, that's why the movie is amazing.
Yes. That's the other part. It's played by Christopher Walken.
Mr. Walken.
Now, younger fans probably only know Christopher Walken as Christopher Walken. He's just essentially playing a version of himself in every movie he does now. But young Christopher Walken from The Dead Zone and Deer Hunter and shit like that was a legitimate Academy Award winning, brilliant,
potentially,
nuanced actor. Then he sort of became like a bit of a caricature of himself, which is fine. He's awesome.
Potentially adjacent to homicide.
Murdering Natalie Wood, or
well,
at least witnessing
it wasn't
it.
murdering. I would say homicide. I
Yeah.
still don't think it was like an intentional, but it might have been like
I'm
an
pretty
accidental.
Pretty sure Robert Wagner did it, and Christopher
Murder
Walken
is usually
kept his fucking mouth
premeditated.
shut.
Homicide is not.
Sure.
So, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, in addition to Christopher Walken, obviously Martin Sheen does an incredible job playing Ronald Reagan in this movie.
He's not playing Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
If anything, he's playing JFK.
Well,
it's got the Lee Harvey Oswald of it.
yes. Let's just say
and
he's
the starting
playing
of a war.
He's playing if JFK and Ronald Reagan were mashed into one person that was mostly Ronald Reagan.
He's not
yes.
playing. I mean, Martin Sheen isn't playing the president from
The West Wing.
The West Wing.
He's playing the polar fucking opposite.
And don't forget Tom Skerritt also, because he plays the sheriff.
Yep.
Which is also really good. This is the first time we're introduced to Castle Rock, Maine.
Yes. With Sheriff George Bannerman. And
the film basically shows Johnny getting a headache from a roller coaster and, discovering all this stuff. But so The Dead Zone was Stephen King's first #1 bestseller, if in hardcover and paperback. And he had
awesome.
switched new publishers, which is also, I think, why this new storytelling approach started to evolve. And this is another novel in which we see psychic powers as part of the narrative. So we saw it in Carrie. We see it in some other works
yeah, I
that
mean,
we're going to talk
this is a time
about.
period when like ESP and shit was all the rage.
Yeah.
In circles of pseudoscience and whatnot.
So as I said earlier, this sort of came out with Stephen King asking those two questions. And since Johnny was given the ability to see the future, he has a vision of Greg Stilson, which is
the president played by
Martin Sheen's character.
Yeah, who's a real bald eagle, flag-waving patriot type.
Yeah, he sees him launching World War III.
We all know where he was on January 6th.
And, Christopher Walken's character is not very different than another paranoid, I can see the future, I need to end this person's life.
Well, like
vigilante
classic
type.
Stephen King hero, he's just a normal, regular, mediocre person forced to make an extraordinary decision.
Yeah, and he loses the love of his life.
Oh, yeah.
He goes into a coma. He wakes up. She's married. He, gets asked to use his psychic powers by Tom Skerritt because there's a serial killer on the loose. So he helps solve that crime, and then everybody wants a piece of him. So he does sort of like this private tutoring gig, and he's got some learning difficulties, rich father, and then he sees basically all of them dying in a terrible fire because of a senior party on like their graduation day.
Mm-hmm.
So he warns them against it, and Chuck and a bunch of other kids stay home, but a lot of kids don't. There's like 80 plus students that end up burning to death.
Yep.
So it's not that his psychic visions are ever positive. I don't remember.
No, he has visions of like impending disaster.
Yes.
And here's the thing. People don't normally respond positively to that. Even if you save their goddamn life, they're just like, you're a witch.
Yeah.
So when he comes into contact with Martin Sheen, he sees this crazy right-wing fucking freak show
At a New Hampshire election rally.
Launching a nuclear strike on Russia and ending the world.
And he knows he's a bad guy already. So we know it too.
Yeah.
We've seen him be pretty dark.
Yes.
So we're convinced by this. And also Johnny's lost it. He's super isolated. He's a lone gunman.
Yeah.
He doesn't spend time with his friends and family.
Yeah.
He has basically just found out that he has that brain tumor that's going to kill him. So he decides on his own that he's going to kill Stilson.
Which
Stilson.
Is two things at once. It is assassinating a United States president, and it is saving billions of human lives. So complicated.
So the difference is here, he essentially in the film, he goes to town, like, I don't know, is it a church or a town hall?
It's like a town hall. It's like a rally type.
He goes
shit.
and
like one of those,
goes
like,
to the rafters, and he's gonna kill Martin Sheen, but instead of actually pulling the trigger, Martin Sheen catches this glimpse of what's happening, grabs a baby, and uses that as a human shield. So his political career is over.
Yep.
So not even killing him, his political career is over. And so the question then comes, and then, Johnny's killed in a hail of gunfire.
As would happen.
Yeah, it's sort of suicide by cop.
Yeah.
But the question is, and this is sort of what the depths and why I like this film so much and the book, is we don't even know if his premonitions were correct. Yes, there was a fire, sure, but about him, how do we know? Maybe it's true, maybe it's not.
You can't prove something that didn't happen. Yeah, exactly. Like, if you succeed
and he's got terrible
and it
headaches,
doesn't come to pass,
he's
then
hiding out from his friends.
Yeah,
He wants to kill someone for reasons that nobody can prove or understand.
It's such an incredible movie because all of the elements are going against what your expectations of them are. Christopher Walken
is sympathetic.
Yes. Martin Sheen is not the good guy. And, it's not that he never played a villain before this movie, but he never played one like this.
But also, Johnny isn't the good guy either.
And David Cronenberg making a movie that isn't about your body turning into like a bunch of mouths or something. All of that is to say is this is one of the best adaptations of one of Stephen King's more interesting and complicated works, especially from earlier in his career, and it is a total subversion of all of your expectations of all the principles involved. It's a movie that works because everyone is doing something different.
Yeah.
And man, that's risky, but this movie is incredible, and it's really, really sad.
And it is really sad, and it's, you really feel for the character. I would say that the book definitely gives you a more sense of the isolation and loneliness of the character of Johnny and everything he really lost, because
that's because you do spend a little bit more time with him before the accident.
Correct. And that love of his life situation, he was trying to do the right thing by leaving. That's what happens in the book. They go out on this wonderful date. They're falling in love. He takes her home. He leaves, and he gets in this horrible car accident. And he's in a coma for almost 5 years.
Yeah, and she moves on, which is, normal.
Absolutely. And he never, it's as if he woke up the next morning still desperately in love with her, but had to adapt and has this horrible, painful. I mean, it's very painful, and I think that's what Christopher Walken shows so well.
And it kind of reminded me of Scanners, like, because all the powers in Scanners look like it hurts to use them.
Yeah, I like that when filmmakers have their characters show the pain.
Oh yeah, Christopher Walken's not a god. He's just got this. I mean, it's not. It could be just as easily called a curse as a gift.
I think that's where Teen Wolf really missed the mark, is they didn't show Michael J. Fox in pain as he was transforming.
Yeah, that's what I really wanted from Teen Wolf, was like a super visceral transformation, like The Howling or
why
like
not
American Wolf in London, where just all of a sudden Michael J. Fox is screaming as his skin rips. That's what was missing.
Well, he's in pain now.
Good God. Anyway, I'm going to move on from that to 1983's, this is a very different movie, 1983's Cujo, by
Woof
director
Woof
Louis Teague. Now, this is based on King's 1981 novel, of the same name. It was a modest success at the box office, mixed reviews, has since been sort of revisited and reevaluated as being a fucking really good movie, which it is. Now,
people are scared of dogs because of this film.
Now, listen, this follows, it's another like Pennywise situation where you say the name Cujo and everybody knows what it is.
Yeah.
Whether they've seen the movie, read the book or not, no one's naming their dog Cujo like for no reason.
Yeah.
So,
for fun.
The thing is, this is another movie that proves what I call the Stephen King constant of inverse Ebert. So the more Roger Ebert hates a Stephen King movie, the better it is. And boy, Roger Ebert hated this movie so much. I mean, I'm pretty sure he shit himself while he was rage typing whatever hyperbole to describe.
Yeah, Roger Ebert hated a lot of movies.
The pedestrian banality of such a mediocre.
Very well with the Academy.
Yeah, he's a fucking snob, and I'm speaking ill of the dead, but whatever. So anyway, that's the inverse Ebert rule: is the more Roger Ebert hates a Stephen King movie, the better chances it's a pretty decent Stephen King movie. So the story here is Cujo is a Saint Bernard, which is a dog that we associate with rescuing people. He's a big, fluffy, lovable. I thought
he was a Rottweiler.
Nope. He's a Saint Bernard. And in the very first scene in the movie, he's chasing a rabbit and sticks his head into a bat cave and gets bitten by a bat. And that's
See everyone?
Bats
are bad.
So Louis Teague is an interesting director. He has made some other movies, which were not very good.
Wow.
But he did do 1980s Alligator. So if he just stuck to like killer animal movies, he would have really knocked it out of the park. But let's say you thought Joss Whedon's version of the Justice League was bad. It was. Let's say you thought Zack Snyder's 4-hour circle jerk, whatever that was, of the Justice League was bad. It was. Well, my friends, you have not seen Louis Teague's 90s version of the Justice League, which starred all of our favorite superheroes like Fire, Ice, and Green Lantern Guy Gardner. Yeah, that's the Roger Corman one.
That's why.
So anyway, Cujo is a slow start of a film. We're introduced to Dee Wallace, who is a suburban mom living in Castle Rock, who is being unfaithful to her husband, who seems like a pretty decent guy and is having some trouble professionally.
You guys all know her. She was the mom in E.T.
I am going to give lots of adulation to Dee Wallace shortly. Now,
The Hills Have Eyes.
Dee Wallace plays the mother. Now, over the course of this film, basically, her marriage falls apart. She's cheating on her husband with a guy played by Christopher Stone, who was her real-life husband. She also starred with Christopher Stone in The Howling, which is one of her other best movies. He tragically died in 1995. But so her marriage is falling apart. Her husband moves out. Her car is ruined. She has to take it to this mechanic who's like 6 miles out of town, played by the late, great John Lauder, who always played like a slimy scumbag, and he definitely does in this movie too. Now, here's the thing. By the time she gets there, she pulls up, and Cujo's already killed everybody there, because he is rabid as fuck by this point. And she gets trapped in a hot car with her asthmatic son for days by a rabid Saint Bernard. Now, props to this movie, because from the beginning of the movie to the end, the deterioration of Cujo is unfucking believable.
It's like, don't work with kids or animals, but this animal was
he becomes
amazing.
Like a disgusting, filthy, foaming, blood-caked, snot-covered pus monster with the strength of a bear that is like a juggernaut killing machine that also kind of seems to psychologically fuck with Dee Wallace at certain times. He mauls the Christ out of people. You ever want to see a St. Bernard bite someone's balls off? You've got the movie to watch. So Cujo is obviously where we get the phrase, it takes a village to raise a Cujo, because Cujo was played by 4 St. Bernards, a Great Dane Doberman mix in a St. Bernard costume, and I would have loved to have been there on the day they were trying to get the St. Bernard costume onto a Great Dane Doberman mix.
Oh my goodness.
And a stuntman human person dressed as a dog. I'm pretty sure I know the scene because there's this part where Dee Wallace is getting attacked by Cujo, and she gets Cujo off of him by kneeing him in the balls in a way that you would a person. So, but that's what it took. Now, I don't mean to say all of this because Cujo looks amazing. Like I said, it works. Now, the way that they get around, Louis Teague does some really, really clever things in this movie. The way they get around the scene of like Dee Wallace wailing on this dog with, a wooden stick. Nobody wants to see that.
Yeah.
So they do it as POV shots from Cujo. So you just see Dee Wallace swinging this thing, and then the camera jerks, instead of watching her pound on a fake dog, which is not something an audience wants to watch, rabid animal or not. It was just, there were some smart filmmaking techniques that allowed the brutality to come through without displaying unnecessary animal cruelty on camera. And props to Louis Teague. It was really well done.
Well, it had a $6 million budget and made $21 million at the box office.
Not bad. Now, it does feature George Bannerman, the sheriff of many a king tale.
Yeah.
And R.I.P. This is where old George meets his end. Cujo rips him to shreds. Now, like a lot of Stephen King cops, he's fucking useless in this movie. I mean, he shows up, does nothing, gets eaten by a dog almost instantly. But R.I.P. to a real one, George Bannerman. He certainly existed in this story.
Yeah.
And he did die. So anyway, Cujo is a movie that,
kudos for Cujo.
It's surprisingly, it does take its time. And this was a criticism that some people had of the film. That, it's boring. Roger Ebert was like, it doesn't have any tension. What that did for me was really, really introduce you to the characters so that when you start imperiling them, you actually want them to make it. Now, Dee Wallace, man.
Adulation. I mean, it was the station wagon scene.
Yeah.
Adulation
for Dee Wallace. She
was. I mean, that's the thing. Where are you going to go?
She is every bit the legendary scream queen that Jamie Lee Curtis is, and does not get nearly enough. The Hills Have Eyes, The Howling, Critters, E.T., Cujo, The fucking Frighteners. I mean, Dee Wallace is in some of the best shit that's ever been done, and nobody plays a haggard, frazzled, at the edge of her wits but still surviving woman like Dee Wallace.
Yeah.
She is trapped in a hot car dealing with her son who's freaking the fuck out, obviously.
Rightfully so.
So she's dealing with that. There's a rabid animal. She gets mauled to shit halfway through, so she definitely has rabies. It's a command performance on her part. She is so good. She really carries the movie. But for my money, the strength is the way they portrayed Cujo as this absolute juggernaut terminator of a monster. And leave it to Stephen King to take not just man's best friend, but a breed specifically known for saving lives and turning it into something to be afraid of. Thanks, Dad.
Well, this is a perfect segue into my next chat is with the short story adapted into a major feature film, Stand By Me. The short story is called The Body, and when...
It's another one with George Bannerman.
I feel like, is it Gordy that is telling the story many years later?
Yeah.
When he talks about when they encounter Chopper,
it's
they
Richard
say
Dreyfuss.
Cujo-like dog named Chopper.
Yeah, because it takes place in Castle Rock.
Yep.
George Bannerman is the sheriff that the kids meet in the beginning. He's much younger.
Yep.
In this story because it takes place in the 50s.
And why this film is amazing? Well, there's a lot of reasons.
Oh, so good.
But one of the biggest reasons is because the cast feels like real kids. And they were real kids, and they were very much sort of versions of themselves as talked about by the still living cast members.
R.I.P. to River Phoenix.
Oh, man.
Who is amazing in this movie.
I know, it's very emotional. This is a very emotional story, especially for someone who grew up in a small town with a small group of friends that you know, find solace in and refuge in.
And these friends are played by Jerry O'Connell, River Phoenix,
Corey Feldman, and Will Wheaton.
And Will Wheaton. So, like, it's a cast. Also, Kiefer Sutherland plays the bully.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a dope cast.
They embody their characters in a way that's so realistic that you automatically are in it as from the first scene.
Oh, yeah.
And Will Wheaton said that at the time he was a shy and awkward kid and really uncomfortable in his own skin. And that really read in his Gordy LaChance.
Yeah.
And
this is before he was on Star Trek.
River Phoenix said he already felt like a father figure, said that, you know, already felt like the father figure of the group. And
yeah, he and Corey Feldman were
like Corey Feldman and Jerry O'Connell were also like their characters.
Yeah.
And the nostalgia of this film isn't just positive. I mean, there's a lot of strife and struggle. King is really good at taking everything about what it means to be a kid in a small town, especially when you think the world, what you think about the world when you're a kid. And they're not necessarily perfect kids. They fight with each other. They say stupid shit. They are, you know, morbidly fascinated by going on this trek to see this dead body.
Dipshits, like anybody that age.
But they also, this film and the book also doesn't, or the short story, novella, I guess, doesn't sugarcoat childhood.
Stephen King never does.
Nope.
And he does not protect his child protagonist from pain because the world does not protect children from pain.
He talks about the experiences that they have as they're struggling. They don't all have loving parents. Teddy, played by Corey Feldman.
Oh, Christ, yeah.
He idolizes his father for his war service and
is
he
disabled
won't
as a result.
Acknowledge that he is abusive.
Yeah.
But his father is now in an institution because of probably PTSD. But Teddy just keeps thinking that he's the hero.
Yeah, it's so sad.
It's so sad. And when Chris, played by River Phoenix, tells Gordy about the crime that he was always been accused of, which is that he steals the milk money. He tells him the truth, and he said, yeah, I stole it, but then I tried to give it back, and the teacher kept it for herself and continued to blame me for it. That is so tragic.
Stephen King also loves, and I love him for this, to write about how cruel adults are to children.
Or the world isn't fair.
Especially the adults that go to church every Sunday and are on the council meetings and put their best face forward. They are the ones who are the worst to kids.
And you're supposed to do the right thing. He immediately regretted it. He tried to do the right thing. He thought he could trust the teacher, and he couldn't. And so he has very little trust in adults. He knows that he gets treated differently because he's sort of like a trashy family. And he presents himself that way to keep with the knowledge.
If you're told you're trash your whole life, then at a certain point, you just lean into it.
Yeah. Why fight it?
Yeah.
And in that moment when he does confide in Gordy, he realizes that he's been the adult center around this group. He's the one that's like, you know, the adult of the group, but he is himself just a kid. And I think that's the first time we really see how just a kid he is. According to Rob Reiner, Stephen King was so touched by Stand By Me after a private screening that he went up to him after and said, "That's the best film ever made out of anything I've written," which isn't saying much, but you've really captured my story. It's autobiographical. All that was made up was the device of the hunt of the body.
And Rob Reiner would then go on to direct another,
which
of
I'm
the
going to talk about
greatest
next.
Adaptations. Yeah. Okay. Well, before you do that, I want to talk about the
pie scene.
The Running Man.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk more about Stand By Me.
I'm going to talk about the
version of
Running
it. I just want to say there are some very visceral, horrifying elements. One being the leeches, another being the pie scene, also the finding of the body, the confrontation with morality. They're trying to run from the train, and then. This always makes me so sad. The epilogue of the film, when you catch up with what everybody's been up to.
Well, it's made even sadder because that character was played by River Phoenix, who also had an early tragic ending.
Yes. So, and just one
My
other...
co-host is openly weeping right now.
I'm not openly weeping,
Yes.
but I am definitely tears in my eyes. But yeah, it was so artfully narrated by Richard Dreyfuss, which... Didn't you just mention him earlier?
As this character, yes.
Yes. So.
And for all of you husky boys out there, never forget that Jerry O'Connell
is now married to Rebecca
Romijn and was also in Sliders. So two pretty cool things.
He's doing pretty well.
Yeah. Mostly Sliders. So anyway, I want to talk about The Running Man because... Here's the thing about The Running Man. 1987, directed by Paul Michael Glaser, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now, The Running Man is a couple of things. It is ostensibly a loose adaptation, and this is the very definition of a loose adaptation, of a Richard Bachman novel, Stephen King's Nom de Plume, R.I.P. Mr. Bachman. It is also... objectively a bad movie.
Yeah, pretty bad.
On the other hand, it's a fucking incredible movie.
Well, because you love movies.
No, it is an amazing, amazing movie. Now,
everyone, just audience, my co-host is now openly weeping, but he loves movies. He loves all movies, just for the art of movies.
This movie is amazing. Now, it is how... If you ever wanted to know, how do I completely disrespect a Stephen King story but still make an infinitely watchable movie, this has been answered with The Running Man. Now, the original concept, and holy shit do I want to see that. Now, I have a running list of Elseworlds movies, of unmade projects that if there is an afterlife, I want to see these movies, like Alejandro Jodorowsky's version of Dune. I want to see George Miller's version of Justice League Mortal. And I want to see the original version of this film, which was supposed to be a much closer adaptation to the book, much darker and serious, and starring Christopher Reeve.
Wow.
Christopher Reeve, yes. Superman himself. I would have given anything to see that. But what we got was an absolute goofball cheese fest of a bizarre movie starring Arnold Schwarzenegger that was so over the top, even Schwarzenegger himself said, I hated what the director did with it. He basically turned it stupid. I wanted to do the original version. Now, this movie is almost nothing like the book. Except it's about a reality TV show before reality TV was even really invented, in which contestants are hunted by American Gladiator style bad guys. Again, before American Gladiators was a show, to the death. And if you win, you get money because it's capitalism and that's what we want. You get to break out of the horrible dystopia that we've created. Now, this movie came out in 1987 and it is unbelievably fucking prescient. Essentially, this game is Survivor if Jeb Probst killed people or let them die.
Oh, he does.
I knew it.
That's how he stays so young.
So, I fucking knew it. Probst, I'm on to you. So it's a reality show hosted by Richard Dawkins.
Yeah, that Richard Dawkins.
Yes. Basically playing himself in this movie. Yeah. And he is incredible. He is so amazing as the sleazy, smarmy host of this show where
it's the Hunger Games.
It's the #1 show in America.
Yeah.
Everyone loves it. There are all these scenes of like crowds gathering to watch it and betting on it and cheering for the bloodlust and all these. It's
the lottery.
It's got a similar satirical vibe to RoboCop because there's like
that
a scene
sort of
where
universe.
There's a scene where like this like mom lady is like, oh, I want to pick my favorite American Gladiator, killer. And by the way, that was played by the lady who plays Charlie's mom on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Oh my God,
yeah.
she's amazing.
Yeah, like way back in the day.
My Charlie.
So anyway, you want to see a movie that has everything. This movie has everything. It's got Yaphet Kotto. It's got Richard Dawson again playing a villain named Killian, who is essentially Richard Dawson. It's got an evil opera singer wearing Christmas lights who drives a go-kart. It's got a sumo wrestler who also plays hockey. And a guy named Dynamo and Buzzsaw.
Let's see that movie remade.
No. It's also starring former Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura.
Not remade,
and
but let's see a new adaptation.
Former California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah. Now, I just said the words former governor of Minnesota Jesse Ventura and former governor of California Arnold Schwarzenegger, and that was a real thing. That happened. This is life.
They didn't even have their sights set on governorship.
Unbelievable. Anyway, I just want to shout this movie. It also has Maria Conchita Alonso in it, which is amazing.
She's amazing.
She is fucking great. Anything she's in, watch it. She's so hilarious in this movie. She is like great. She basically gets kidnapped and taken into this game against her will, and she's like so awesome. So Schwarzenegger meets up with an underground group that's trying to take the game down. It's got some of the greatest lines ever, like up Lake Underground, if you guys don't shut up, I'm gonna up Lake your ass and you'll be underground. So that's the kind of movie you're watching. I can't recommend this movie enough. Turn your brain off, watch it. It's really, it is a satire. It's over the top. It's silly. It is bombastic and noisy and colorful. But watching it nowadays, fucking hell is it prescient. I mean, Stephen King came up with the idea years before this movie, but the execution and just the gleeful bloodlust of the audience is so goddamn believable. Given the state of things, I can absolutely see David Zaslav pitching like an actual Running Man show for Max or whatever goddamn thing it's called now. So anyway, The Running Man, it's a blast. It just is. You're not going to see a movie like this anywhere else because no movie like this exists.
Except the Hunger Games.
Which was a complete ripoff of Battle Royale.
Right. Which wasn't funny, though.
But was a dark comedy and a satire.
Yeah, but it wasn't funny.
It had its moments.
So Misery, starring James Caan and Kathy Bates, who plays a writer and one of his obsessed fans, Kathy Bates. So Paul Sheldon gets into a car accident. Kathy Bates takes him home and holds him captive while he recovers, and she forces him to write his last book under her very specific conditions. So I think everybody's familiar with Misery. We've talked about it on some other episodes as well.
I mean, and again, it's another example of an actor known for one thing doing a completely different thing. I mean, Sonny Corleone plays a completely helpless writer.
Well, I'll get into the casting in a second, but I just wanted to say that the real horror is, you know, the physical horror along with the psychological horror of this crazy fan. And I think that's really when Stephen King started to become a little bit more famous, calling upon his own experience.
Oh, he's always mined his own life for material.
The infamous sledgehammer to the ankles scene,
Which
was
in the book
axe to the ankles.
is worse.
Yep.
She straight up cuts his feet off.
One of the reasons why the book is so intense also is because it really traps the reader with Paul's need to get out of the bed, need to get to the outside to get help.
Also, in the book, there are two scenes they cut from the book, where where she eats a dead rat in front of him, and then another where she like cleans up blood and then makes him drink the bloody soap water from the bucket. Well,
they added something in the film because Richard Farnsworth, playing the local sheriff.
R.I.P. again to another king.
Yeah, I mean, he was old in that movie.
You know what? If just quick aside, watch The Straight Story, directed by David Lynch, starring Richard Farnsworth. It's not a typical David Lynch movie. It's a beautiful, beautiful movie.
So Buster shows up to investigate. It was totally invented because they needed to reveal some plot devices, and she kills him. But she doesn't use a shotgun, she stabs him with a cross and then runs over him with a lawnmower.
Yeah. Kathy Bates is incredible.
Yeah.
Because her mood swings are terrifying. She plays, that horribly frightening combination of like buttoned up, prudish kind of Christian type who is also a serial killer.
Yeah, she won't swear.
Yeah.
She won't let him swear, but she'll chop his ankle off.
Yeah, but she'll break his fucking legs. Yeah, I know. Amazing.
So Paul in the movie, Paul in the book pretends to burn his finished version of Misery's Return.
Yeah.
Setting a blank page on fire, but in the movie, he actually does burn it. And the adaptation is the only film based on Stephen King novel that's won an Oscar. Kathy Bates won an Oscar for Best Actress in the Leading Role, beating Angelica Houston for The Drifters and Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman. William Hurt was initially offered the role of Paul Sheldon twice.
Wow.
Followed by Kevin Kline,
I didn't
Michael
even know William
Douglas
Hurt was still alive at that point.
Well, Kevin Kline, Michael Douglas.
Oh, no. I'm thinking William Holden. Sorry. My bad.
So followed by Kevin Kline, Michael Douglas, Harrison Ford, and Dustin Hoffman. They were all offered the role.
James Caan crushed it.
He did.
But also,
when they did a screening of the
Dustin
film,
Hoffman.
When they did a screening of the film, Stephen King came and sat in the back. And when Misery, well, not Misery, I like to call her Misery. When Annie Wilkes brings that tray and there's a gun.
Yep.
Stephen King shouted, "There's a gun under there." And so I think that was sort of his approval, his stamp of approval.
Nice.
So Misery, obviously.
Imagine being like, who the fuck's that asshole?
And we mentioned that
the
director was Rob Reiner.
Yeah.
Of both Misery and Stand By Me. But he hasn't done another Stephen King adaptation. He never did another Stephen King adaptation after
Which is
that.
a shame.
It really is, because he gets at the heart of the Stephen King verse.
I think, Stephen King has like a couple of directors like Mick Garris, Frank Darabont, and most recently Mike Flanagan as his mainstays, and Rob Reiner should have been one of them. I want to just go back real quick because it skipped my mind. I can't believe it. You were talking about remaking The Running Man, and I was fighting you on that because it's already perfect. It is being remade.
Nice.
And
the book, though, not that film.
No, it is an adaptation of the Richard Bachman novella.
Nice.
And attached to direct it, at least right now, is Edgar Wright.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Well, that seems like it's going to be a little campy then funny.
Not necessarily.
Well,
You
okay.
didn't see Last Night in Soho.
I didn't.
So, very
I
potentially
did, actually.
excited about
I
that.
saw it last night
Ah,
in Soho.
fantastic. I was in Tribeca. So, just real quick, there are a couple of other movies from this time period that are absolutely worth checking out. Creepshow is phenomenal. It adapts 2 of his short stories. Stephen King is even acts in this one. Stephen King acts in a segment in this anthology where it is a single location and he's the only character. And he is maybe the worst actor ever. It's basically like watching The Room if Tommy Wiseau was the only person in it. It's really special. Directed by George Romero, and it's got an amazing cast. Everyone from Ted Danson, Adrienne Barbeau, Hal Holbrook, Leslie Nielsen in a non-funny role.
We got a couple others like Christine,
directed by John Carpenter, starring
Yeah.
that guy from Back to School, not Rodney Dangerfield and not Robert Downey Jr. and not Kurt Vonnegut. The other guy.
Wait,
Yeah, about a car that...
Kurt Vonnegut
Kurt Vonnegut.
was in Back to School.
Yeah. Remember Rodney Dangerfield hired him to write his paper on Kurt Vonnegut, and then Kurt Vonnegut showed up in a cameo, and he's like, "Hello, I'm Kurt
Oh
Vonnegut."
yeah, right.
And then later on in the movie, when he got an F on the paper, he was told, "Whoever wrote this doesn't know the first
Keith
thing
Gordon,
about Kurt Vonnegut."
right?
Yeah.
And John Stockwell also
Yep.
is in, and Harry Dean Stanton. Did you say that already?
Nope. But that
He's in
anytime
Christine
Harry
as
Dean
well.
Stanton shows up in anything, it should be mentioned.
Let us not forget about Children of the Corn.
Which stinks. It's a
does.
bad movie. It's got Linda Hamilton in it.
We're just mentioning.
And it's got, a ginger kid named Malachi screaming Outlander, we have your woman. But other than that, it is not great. I want to talk oh, no, that's in the 90s. We're going to have to save that one. So,
A Firestarter, which we mentioned. Cat's Eye, which is a weird movie,
it's
but
another
not to
anthology.
be undersold. But
No,
one
it's
thing
got
that I
young
didn't
Drew
mention,
Barrymore in it.
Yeah. One thing that I wanted to mention that I didn't, maybe I could have, but I didn't, is Silver Bullet. Listen.
Oh, Silver Bullet rules.
Don't sleep on Silver Bullet. Starring.
Also, don't sleep on Cycle of the Werewolf, the short novella it's based on.
Yeah. I mean, starring Corey Haim and your friend,
Gary Busey.
Gary Busey. It is really good.
It's really good. And listen,
it's a good 80s romp, people.
For our younger listener, there was a time period when Gary Busey was a legitimate actor who was actually nominated for an Academy Award for playing Buddy Holly at one point, but was in real movies playing real parts, and that was it. He didn't become this like weird cartoonish, visibly insane person whose mental illness was exploited for ratings.
Obviously came out in 1989 as Pet Sematary, which we've
Mary
talked
Lambert's
about a bunch.
version. It's amazing.
And then which we're not going to talk about in this or the next episode, this particular version, because we are probably going to do a remake on it. But we're definitely going to do a remake on the It.
When I was deciding if I was going to talk more about Pet Sematary, and I was researching Mary Lambert, because I greatly prefer the original version to the remake that came out a couple years ago. I discovered that Mary Lambert also directed a movie called Mega Python vs. Gatoroid, starring Debbie Gibson and Tiffany.
Wow.
Yeah. So Gatoroid is not a giant bottle of Gatorade. It's a giant alligator. It fights a mega python, which I think speaks for itself. And we are the only thing standing in their way are Debbie Gibson and Tiffany. So
they're always standing in someone's way.
I don't think we're alone now.
Well,
but the last one obviously is Maximum Overdrive, because why not watch Emilio Estevez fight evil sentient trucks in a movie directed by an incredibly coked out Stephen King himself? Because honestly, if you want to know what America is, I can't think of a better description of it.
So we are talking about the first set of Stephen King adaptations, and I think we've mentioned there are quite a few good ones. So when we do part 2, we're going to mine through the shit sandwich that is the way too many adaptations that weren't good in the second episode, but
I'm interested to get into the 90s, though, because there
Yeah.
were like a lot of hidden gems in the 90s that I don't
I'm
think are
getting
talked about anymore.
I'm interested in getting into some of the real high quality adaptations and some
Yeah.
that, didn't need to be adapted. And then, ones that maybe I'll watch that I've never seen because I'm looking at a list of them right now. And
Oh, there are plenty that I'm never going to get to because honestly, I only have a few more lives after this one. So
well, the book Thinner, I love so much.
You've never seen the movie?
No.
It sucks.
I'm going to watch it. I know. I'm going to watch it.
Thinner.
Ew.
Oh God! Did you read the book? You said?
Yeah, I loved
the
it.
book is
Loved
awesome.
the book. Loved the
It's
book.
got that great twist. The movie starring the guy who was RoboCop after Peter Weller stopped being RoboCop. So yeah, the guy from RoboCop 3, John Burke, I think is his name. There's some trivia for you.
Oh, when I Google Thinner, it comes up with paint thinner. Just to let you know, you guys, just to look at Thinner film. It stars Robert John Burke.
Yeah.
And Joe Mantegna.
Hey. Fat Tony himself.
Hey. All right. Well, we hope you enjoyed this. And
Especially you, Mr. King.
join us
This
for
was
part
for you.
2 somewhere down the horizon.
When we run out of ideas.
No, that's not true. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Terror in Tandem is written, produced, and recorded by Laura and Richard Mathiasen, and edited and mixed by Richard Mathiasen. Our theme was written and performed by Carrie Denver, and all other music was written and performed by David Sispanik. All opinions expressed on this podcast are our own and should be taken as such. Thanks for listening, and please remember to give us a like, a review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. We're standing right behind you.